Our next stop will be back over in Murphy, North Carolina, where we visit with Bobbi Umbach. Bobbi's come to the art world just recently. She had not found her true passion until she was introduced to fused glass. She has a special technique that I'm particularly interested in. Let's go down to Bobbi's studio now. Bobbi, tell us about your first project today.
Okay, I used to buy glass from a local glass store, and they closed up because they weren't getting enough business, and they went to Puerto Rico. And I had to start buying my glass online. And what you see on the computer monitor and what you see when you get it in the mail are oftentimes very different things.
I find that true too.
So I took a class at the folk school in which I was introduced to painting on glass, and I thought, I'm just going to make my own glass. So basically, most of what I do today is actually painting on glass. So I thought I would demonstrate a painted piece, which is going to be somewhat like a quilt.
Ooh.
Okay, I use a powdered paint. This is from a company called Satellite Unique. It's a paint specifically designed to be fired onto glass. You've probably heard of other kinds of painted glass where you put it in your oven and cure it. This has to go to around 1400 degrees in order to be cured. So I use the powdered kind. This company has a liquid kind. This is water I'm mixing it with. But their liquid paints are leaded, and since a lot of what I make are functional pieces, like plates and platters, I have to put a piece of clear glass on top if I'm using leaded paint. I often will do that anyway, so I thought, well, I'll just use the leaded paints, but I found that if I put a piece of clear glass on top, they bubble.
Ooh.
And I don't like that. So I've gone back to using the non-leaded paints, which means I have to mix them all the time. Okay. So this is you'll see I'm using highly technical tools
I
here.
see that.
This is an appetizer fork that I use to scoop the paint out with. Obviously, you do have to have roughly the same amount each time if you want to be able to reproduce the results that you've gotten. So this is dry glass paint, a little bit of water.
Does the paint base have a glass? Is it powdered glass?
It's very finely ground glass with the chemicals are what give it the color.
And this, I know like in ceramic, the colors aren't true when you paint them. Is this true here? Does it change?
Yeah, you'll see very much like a ceramicist who puts a glaze on his pot. He won't know what it looks like till it comes out of the kiln. I'll show you in just a few minutes once we get this dry how it looks very different once it's dried. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is I don't paint pictures, I paint designs, or like the glass that I used to buy at the store. I won't like to paint glass similar to that. That's one. Now because the paint will not look like this when it dries, I have to make my own paint chart so that I know if I'm adding this, I know what color it will look like once it's fired. Otherwise, I get some really nasty surprises. And this paint will settle out, so I have to redistribute it before I put it on.
I like those. I like those colors. Are they going to
I like kind of a marbling. Yeah, well, they will, but then they'll come back to very close to this color. I'll show you. And one really dark one to kind of show up. Blue.
That adds a lot of contrast. That's good.
Now you'll notice another highly technical feature here. I have a little piece of glass here. This is because this floor slopes that way. When I'm painting, all the paint will run off. Now I'm just going to spritz it with water. This is a technique I got from my husband, who is a watercolor painter. Let the paint run a little bit. I usually will wet a brush and kind of just move the paint around to make sure I'm covering the whole piece. Now oftentimes I'll just leave the piece like this, but most of the time I will use some kind of texturing material. Now, for this example, I'm going to use saran wrap, another technique I got from my husband.
Sounds like a handy fella.
He's a very handy fella to have around. Okay, when you put the saran wrap on it, you then can move it around, and it will dry and form those little lines. I will usually leave this overnight to let it dry. When it gets close to being dry enough, I finish it off with a hairdryer.
When you lift it up, does it take some of the paint up when it comes? Or
Not if I let it dry long enough.
Okay.
If I were to lift it now, you get some of that pattern, but not very much. Most of it would go away. So it has to dry for a while.
A non-professional question, do you ever cut yourself?
All the time,
Do
which
you
is
really?
why I actually have a box of Band-Aids down here.
I would have to have a couple.
I will look down sometimes and see some brown on the glass and wonder, where did that come from? And I realize I'm bleeding on the glass again.
But not on your heart and soul, but you put blood, sweat, and tears too.
Right. Okay, so we'll wait for this to dry. Okay, you can see now that the paint is dried, and it doesn't look very much like it did when we painted it when it was wet. And this is why I have to have something like this. This is a color chart, so that whenever I buy paint, I will put a sample down on glass and fire it so that I know when fired to 1400 degrees, which is where these paints mature, this is what it will actually come out looking like. And this piece has not been fired, it's just dry. This is a piece similar to what I just did that has already been fired, so you can see the difference in the way it looks.
It really brings out the color.
Absolutely. Okay, once I get this fairly dry, I might go in and add something which I refer to as metallic lusters. These are made by the Thompson Enamel Company. And it just kind of adds a little pizzazz. I'm just going to add gold drops.
Ooh. That adds a lot of interest.
And then I'll continue to dry this. Oftentimes, if I like what I've gotten, once it's fired, I'll just use this piece as it is. But the piece I'm demonstrating today, I'm doing more or less a patchwork quilt. So what I will do with this now is I will cut this piece up into strips. I normally cut on the back side, not on the paint side, simply because the paint will tend to chip if I don't. I use what's called a Morton system because it's real easy to measure and cut. And I'll cut these pieces into smaller pieces. The squares that I normally use are about 2 inches by 2 inches. Okay, now we're ready to assemble. Okay, now since we're going to be assembling this as a quilt, it means that I've got lots of little pieces, which means that I have to build this on something that I can then pick up and put directly into the kiln. This quilt shelf is a material called Kaiser Lee board. It's a refractory material that you can actually carve, and I actually make a lot of my own molds out of this material. So I'm going to build this piece directly on the kiln shelf that's going to be used to put it into the kiln with. So essentially I'm like a quilt maker. I'll just put some pieces around till I like the way they look. There's 4 pieces of white glass on the outside of this piece.
So you really don't have a picture in your head of what you want yet? You're just going to see what
Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It just depends. Depends on the mood I'm in. But basically I'll just play around with this until it looks the way I want it to look.
Almost looks like a starry night.
Mm-hmm. And if I run up against a situation like this, where this piece is a little bit too big, what I will do is I will either cut that little piece off or I'll grind it down till the piece fits. And then I may cut some of these in smaller strips to put up the middle.
Right.
So just to show you what I would do when I get through with this. Obviously these pieces are not going to fit exactly, because I'm not going to take the time to do any grinding for you, but
could you also like fill in, like doing a quilt, could you fill in with a darker color to make it more?
oh, absolutely. I could fill in with a solid. I could even
Right.
put another piece of white in there. And then once I'll finish with that, most people like a heavier feel to their glass, particularly functional pieces like plates and platters. So almost all of my glass are 2 layers thick. For another reason, it's sturdier. It's less likely to break. So I will put another piece of glass on top of this. And then this whole thing will go in the kiln to what we call a full fuse. And what a full fuse means is that we will take it up to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit and hold it there for about 20 minutes until all of these pieces of glass become one. And it'll come out of the kiln as a flat piece. Glass is unlike most other crystalline materials. When you heat metal, as you heat it up, and it's solid, solid, solid until you hit a specific temperature, and instantly it's a liquid. This does not happen with glass. Glass is an amorphous structure. In fact, at room temperature, it's often called a supercooled liquid. And as a result, you can't heat it up real fast. You have to go real slow. That's why fused glass takes a while. In my big kiln, it will be at least 24 hours before I can take anything out.
And it has to cool at a
It has to heat up slowly, and it has to cool down slowly. So this would go in now for a full fuse at 1500 degrees, and that would take roughly 10 hours, including the heat up time, the fusing time, the cooling down, and the annealing time. The annealing is a process where we will cool slow enough that, in theory at least, every molecule in the glass is the same temperature before we open the kiln. Okay, now we've taken this out of the kiln. This took about 10 hours to go to a full flat fuse. Now, if I were going to use this just as a piece of art, I would get a stand, and this would be standing in it. What we're going to do is we're going to make a sushi plate out of this, which means it's going to have to be fired again, and this time it will be fired into a form that it will take the shape of. I'm going to use a ceramic sushi form, and this is a process known as slumping. Okay, so this is now going to go onto a form and into the kiln. We'll take it up only to about 1268 degrees. And I go to what I refer to as visual maturity, which means when the piece looks the way I want it to look. I teach fused glass classes at the Campbell Folk School, and a lot of people will, in every class I will have somebody ask me, is my piece done yet? And I have to tell them, I don't know, because I don't have that picture in my head what you wanted your piece to look like. So what I will do is I'll take it up to process temperature, which as I said would be 1265, and I will continue to peek in every so often to see if it's slumped as much as I want it to. So let's go put it in the kiln.
Okay.
Okay, and here we have the piece out of the kiln, formed.
All it's missing is the sushi.
All it's missing is the sushi, and usually I will use a diamond Dremel tip and put my name on the back. I sign my pieces.
All artists should sign their work.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.